Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is a condensed version of my painting Tulips 1. I began this work wet on wet, and then I went in to define the forms of the flowers and the leaves. As I worked, the painting got increasingly tighter, which was not my original intention, but sometimes you just have to listen to what the painting tells you it wants to do. I had used some salt while the painting was wet, and I ended up doing some detailing of the fine crystals and the structure left on the leaves. I define the shadows, the darks, and all the forms in the leaves, and then finally I use a cover-up technique where I hide different parts of the painting to show me what needs to be done and developed on the exposed parts. I hope you enjoy the video and give it a like if you do. I appreciate you subscribing as well. Now let's paint. This is my reference photo. I frequently work from reference photos and try to be inspired by what I see. Sometimes I copy exactly, and sometimes I take the colors and the forms and then just try to run with them, like I'm doing for this painting. For this episode, I've decided to work with some tulips. I've done a lot of landscapes recently, and I wanted something free and beautiful and loose, and that was my goal here. I'm starting out with my spray bottle and putting down some wet areas where I can start in with some good bright colors. As you can see, I'm forming the form of the tulip in yellow. There were two peachy yellow colored tulips in my arrangement. My next tulips were sort of a burgundy and sort of a lavender. As well as a pink tulip. I'm working very wet, and I'm not overly concerned about the paint spreading, but I have contained it to some extent in where I've wet the paper. Working loose like this, if the purple spreads up into the green leaf, it's not a matter of concern for me. Building up some strong darks, which will very likely dry much later. Turning the painting sideways allows me to get a straight line where I want it, such as in a tulip stem. The start of a painting like this is the easiest part. The accidents happen where they happen, some successfully and pretty, and others that will need to be tweaked and worked with. At this point, I'm elevating the paper on the end and trying to let the paint run downward in a natural leaf type formation. And there goes the run. I will steer it down to where I think it might look good. And there goes that one. I'm adding a light spray over the surface. And sometimes the spray will make a nice little texture, a pebbly texture. Almost like salt greens would do. I'm pressing my paper towel into a couple spots to make them a little lighter between the leaves. pressing hard so the paint will actually come off the paper and the paper will dry a little bit and not just seep right back in. Against the light, the yellow tulip had some almost brown colors showing as shadows. So I've mixed together some burnt sienna and a little purple and made a mauve to try to show some of these shadows. And it's a good idea to take any color that you use in one place on a painting, at least into one other place on the same painting. So I'm trying to bring some of these oranges down into the leaves as well. Now I'm dropping some grains of salt onto the wet paint, which will further add some texture when they dry. Each little piece of salt will absorb some paint and make a cool little mark on the paint surface, and it can be quite interesting. I'm just using regular table salt here. Now once you put your salt down, you really can't paint into that area again, or your salt's not going to do anything except turn into seawater and mess with your paints. So I'm trying not to work on the salted area, but just add a couple more touches. And then it dried overnight. This is how it looked the next day. As you can see, all my colors have faded considerably. But I do have some nice loose forms to work with. I have decided to detail the tulip flowers with some petals, and yet I did not want to over detail them and make another tight painting, as I sometimes tend to do. I wanted to work loose here. So I'm coming in and outlining where I want to put some individual petals. I paint a line in. I get the color to the point where I like it, and then I will blend it out with a little water. Back again, I am detailing the petals, and I'm taking a little bit of paint out where I want the light to shine through the petal, such as what I saw in my picture. I was using a photographic reference from a lovely bouquet I took in the winter, where I ordered a big basket of bulbs, watered them, and they all came up and bloomed so pretty for me. It was a real brightener for a dreary winter time in Pennsylvania. What my aim is here is to define petals without overdoing and overworking. I'm painting in shadowed lines and then softening them with water, very repetitiously, but it seems to be the best approach I have. In some areas the petals were quite dark. As I paint, I'm also conscious of the fact that the petals curve. They are not flat. So I'm trying to paint in a way that suggests the curve of each individual petal. Now, by accident in my approach, I had left a white area in the middle of the petal. And I may or may not decide to keep that just for the sake of a little unusual accent. I also do not have all the petals of the tulip shaped in a perfect manner, but I'm working with what I have and letting it flow out of the lines. Now this tulip is somewhat set back, so I'm not going to define it as clearly. I'm coming in with some cobalt blue and some ultramarine blue and showing a few of the petals, but I'm not going to overpaint this little distant tulip. Again, I'm taking a little color off to try to capture the glow of light shining through the tulip. And I add that same light little glow at the bottom of the tulip. Now my next tulip is sort of a pinkish purple, but also had a lot of blue tones to it. So I'm starting out by defining the edges. Again, you'll see some green right into this tulip. But I'm really not concerned in the slightest about that. The green can stay there. I'll paint over it and work with it. I've seen green in a lot of tulips, especially paler colors, so it's quite natural. As I was forming this tulip, I did make a couple of mistakes that I'll have to go back and correct later. But I put the petals in a non-logical way, and they will have to be fixed. The petals should all overlap in a certain way. And I got the overlapping out of order, which you'll probably see a little bit further ahead. And then you'll see me have to fix it. So to me, the green showing through these colors are not of a problematic nature. They just look fine to me. It just becomes part of the beautiful loose flowers. All of the detailing work I've done on the tulips so far hasn't brought them out enough to my satisfaction. So I'm going to come back in and do some more glazing and some more petal definition. When I put just the right colors down and they appear bright enough, frequently I need to go back and add more layers. It's important that you add the layers of color after the painting has totally dried. The object is to build up layers slowly, one on the other, without dislodging the layer that was just put down the previous day. So glazing involves some patience and some building up. I'm using the complement of yellow to do some shadows on it. The complement of yellow being purple. And what I feel is that will incorporate the other purples into the landscape, or into the floral rather. At this point, I decided I was going to incorporate all those little salt crystal textures that were in the painting and had occurred in the leaves. I am incorporating them by circling them and enhancing the shapes. I had done that in several of the tulips above. Where the salt had left marks, I decided to texture it out by enhancing it. This was sort of an experiment, and I decided if I liked how it looked, I would do more. If it had looked unpleasant to me, or I did not want to continue, I certainly could have painted over it and blended it back in. But I thought it was sort of neat. I belong to several Facebook pages that are supportive of watercolor and the arts in general, and people feel free to ask questions. One time I posted a picture and lamented that I had not been as loose as I wanted. And one of the responses to that post was, why does everything have to be loose? Maybe a painting states what it wants to be itself, and you have to go with the flow. What's wrong with being a little tight? I would hardly call this painting tight as well. So if the painting was demanding that it be more defined, I guess maybe I just had to listen to the painting sometimes. Here I've incorporated green into this very yellow and orange and mauve tulip, and I like it. What the green does is pull us back down into the leaves below, just as I brought the yellow into the leaves. Now I'm bringing a little bit of leaf color into the flower. Back to my painting in progress and doing some evaluation. I'm getting pretty pleased with this, and I think it's almost done. So I'm covering up different portions to see what's needed. And I've spotted some things I want to do. A little bit of accenting and bringing out of the composition on the left. Taking that same blue more strongly into the right as well. There's also that blue in the tulips in some sections. So I'm bringing the colors around to incorporate the painting. Here I'm taking a little bit of the orange down because it was maybe too bright. And I add it right back again. But maybe cleaner because I took off some paint. Put in a strong accent at this point because it seemed needed when I did my cover up. And a counterbalance on the left to accent that side as well. I'm not painting by the reference photo at this point. I'm painting by what is the image on the paper. Balancing the composition, adding textural details, and just doing what seems called for. This is a very subjective point of your painting. Everyone will have different ideas about how to finish something. And I've found that using the cover up with the paper really does seem to point out some things that need accenting or added to in your composition. At this point, I would not call this a realistic painting. And yet it would not meet my criteria for being a loose painting either, which was my original intention and concept. Because I tightened so many edges and detailed so many petal forms and leaves. But I've tried to keep some lost, soft edges, as well as hard edges, where the shadows meet right up against the softer, lighter forms. And overall, this painting is a response to both the beautiful bouquet that I enjoyed from a living bulb garden last winter, as well as a response to the image I took of that bulb garden against my window with the light shining through, and the color is so beautiful. So my response is really an expression of how I felt about it, as well as painting the flowers and the flower forms. Playing with some decorative edges here. I saw some blobs of color that I had accidentally splattered in the top. And getting close to the finish here, I decided to see what might like to come up and allow the whites to stay a little cleaner. In the past, if I've had a lot of accidental splatter, shall we say, I've chosen to go ahead and just enhance that and make splatters in the painting. In this case, they did come off. And I do like the clean whites in this. I tried hard to leave some clean white negative space in the leaves as well as around the flowers. Darkening for a final time on the stems. Those vertical forms going through the leaves really do add some structure. And if they're good and dark, they'll add more structure. I've decided it's done. I found a nice place to put my signature. And I'm pretty happy with this. Not what I intended, but it certainly did come out to be expressive and an interesting tulip painting. And I love the colors. And the end. I hope you enjoyed my video of Tulips 1, and I hope you learned something. I appreciate your likes, and please do subscribe. If you click on the bell and select all, you'll get a ring whenever I post a new video. Your comments are welcome, as well as your feedback, because I really do want to make my video helpful and informative. I'll see you soon with a new end-to-end video, so please don't forget to subscribe.